I arrived home in the sprinkling rain. At the door to my new home, I already had a key. I opened the door quietly, as it was quite late at night, hoping not to awaken any neighbors or arouse any suspicions, though I knew it was well within my rights to be there. It did not yet feel like somewhere I belonged. I stepped in, I pulled my bags in, and I closed the door behind me, locking it. I knelt down and lay against the door. I rested for a while, not knowing what to make of my new surroundings, the dampness still clinging to my coat. I leaned forward to pull it all the way off, and lay it at my side. All that I could see was the moonlight coming in through the window by the door, casting ghostly shadows across the room. I could see the faint outline of what might have been an oven and what might have been a dishwasher, but I was not yet ready to inhabit that space. And so, with a sigh and with a will, I lifted myself up and carried my backpack to the top of the stairs. Opening the door to my room, the bed was already made, and I placed my bag at the foot of it. From the side pouch of my backpack I removed the small Bluetooth speaker. I looked around the room for a place to plug it in. On the windowsill there rested a tropical plant in a clay pot. It fanned out, and over the course of time its four-dimensional form would appear like that of a green firework, temporary tower soaring skyward. At its base, a wire came up from the soil, grafted deeper down in the roots. I plugged my speaker into the cable, twisting the fitting in like a corkscrew. I waited for a moment, and the power indicator light flashed on the speaker. I started to remove my clothes, leaving them in a pile on the floor, just where I stood. I removed my phone from my pocket and paired it to the speaker. I moved over to the bed and searched for an outlet. I found one in the wall. I had to return to my backpack to remove a small cable for it. The cable I twisted into the outlet, and then into my phone. And then I placed the phone on my nightstand and crawled into the bed. I selected the podcast I'd been listening to earlier on the train. It was peaceful lying there, and for a moment my finger lingered over the play button. I looked at the reflection of the moonlight on the walls, casting oblong shadows around the room. The unfamiliar room, which would now be my home for who knows how long. Maybe a long time, maybe a short time, though I hoped that it would be a long time. I pressed play. Playing from down below. We didn't know where the source of the sound had come from. There was very little space in this tower. As imposing as it was, its entire volume was enclosed in just 4 rooms: the bottom of the stairs, the treasure room, the alcove, and the room we stood in. We had not seen anyone as we walked. The music grew louder and louder, cresting in a crescendo that threatened to damage our eardrums. We were startled when we heard the heavy door slam shut down below us. And then, all at once, both the music and the whispers stopped entirely. We had meant to spend the night in that place, but in that moment we realized that our exorcism may have been complete the moment we opened the door. We were not contracted to worry about what the spirit did outside of that room, and so we were content to let it fly as it willed. And we began to lay the salt thickly about the floors and on the windowsills, and at the threshold to the heavy oak door. We continued scattering salt until every surface and every step was covered, and then we began to draw chalk on the walls, warding symbols, to push spirits out, to make them uncomfortable, and to make them feel unwelcome. And then we created a pyre of bitter herbs at the base of the tower to fill the entire space with smoke and ensure that nothing No spiritual force would ever want to return for the reek of the stuff. It was a concoction of various herbs and spices, bitter remedies and oils, the exact formulation of which is a trade secret, you will understand. We lit the pyre and stepped outside the threshold, allowing the smoke to billow up and into the cavernous space of the tower. The fire drew in a strong draught from outside, and though the smoke was clearly great, thick and white and billowing, none escaped from the sealed tower. We leaned against the heavy stone wall of the tower while the fire burned its way out. Rather than sit in the squelching mud, I removed a pouch of tobacco and some rolling papers from my coat and rolled a crinkled, filterless cigarette to share between me and my partner. We stood there, leaning against the wall, smoking, smelling the heavy herbs all around us, and feeling the draft, strong and cool and laden with rain and lightning, drawing itself into the tower, filling it once more with what had not reached it in centuries and more, filling it with wild air. Once again, the unnatural green lightning struck, somewhere off in the distance, but enough to illumine the whole dome of the sky with its unholy light. We stared out over the muddy bottom of the lake, up to the path which traced its way back into the fishing village, up over mossy, ancient stones which had rested around the edge of the lake for what must have been millions of years. They were enormous and scattered, and among them, for a moment, I fancied I saw a fox. Not red like fire, but black like coal, or like the devil's own soul. I looked at it for a moment as it picked its way up the trail towards the fishing village. I stared at it. It had a peculiar energy about it. It stopped abruptly, turning around to face me. I could not quite tell, but its eyes appeared to be closed. And then, for a moment, they opened, and I saw they glowed an eerie green light, vermilion against the gathering twilight, shining like emeralds in the gloom. And then it turned, swiftly traveling up the path and into the unknowable vastness of the taiga around us. I turned to my partner and asked if she had seen it, but she said nothing. We stood for a while longer, but we could tell it was almost dark, and we sensed that there was no more need for us to be in this place. We closed the portal to the ancient tower. With a bang, it slammed shut. We marked it with chalk runes, and furthermore spiked it with heavy iron pegs, and a warning in Russian, in thick, square Cyrillic letters. Warning that none should enter here. The spirit was banished, but we did not know if it would return. Do not open the door. And with that, I placed the chalk in my pocket, put away my tobacco and rolling papers, and signaled for my partner to follow as I walked through the mud towards the path through the fishing village. It would be a long journey back home, but we would be paid handsomely for our efforts, and I hoped that we would never have to return.